Welcome to 28storms.com. This is your tropical weather update for Monday, June 13th. As of 2 p.m. Eastern Time, there are no highlighted areas in the Atlantic or the Eastern Pacific, but we'll still take a quick look at things. Much of the Atlantic is being dominated by high pressure near the surface this afternoon. We still have a 1026 millibar Azores high, which is fairly normal across much of the Atlantic during the summer months, but it is acting to suppress the intertropical convergence zone well to the south this afternoon, with the ITCZ located well south of 10 degrees north. It's actually between 0 and 5. And when the ITCZ is suppressed this far south, you're not going to get any development wave out in the Atlantic. And it's really not the climatologically favored area during this month anyway. It's usually more toward the Caribbean and Gulf where we like to look at any potential disturbances for development. And another thing that we typically watch for is if there's any tropical waves that are suppressed in the Atlantic but are strong enough to make it all the way across and possibly stir up some activity down the road. And as of right now, we do have these two tropical waves, so we'll take a look at those more than anything out there in the basin today. And the Eastern Pacific is fairly quiet following the dissipation of Adrian, but we'll start looking toward the monsoon trough near Central America, because that could be a focal point for any potential development. Latest water vapor imagery shows rather unfavorable conditions. We have a fairly stable Gulf of Mexico with lots of dry air aloft. The same can also be said for much of the Caribbean. The western Atlantic does have some more moisture to contend with, but as you can see, there's a very large upper level low. This was actually the upper level low that's been over much of the Gulf of Mexico for the past week plus, and that was also responsible for shearing apart Invest 94L. As you recall, that was the tropical disturbance that originated in the western Caribbean and then got shunted off to the northeast well into the far North Atlantic. This upper low is finally beginning to kick out and won't be much of a player in the long-term weather, but it's at least making conditions unfavorable across much of the region today. Now down toward the south, we have that aforementioned tropical wave now approaching 55 degrees west longitude. And as it continues to move more toward the west, some of the convection is actually being enhanced by this upper level low located over the central Atlantic. And while this upper level low will create enough wind shear to disrupt any chances of tropical development, it's acting to cause enough upper level difluence to enhance some of the convection temporarily as this tropical wave passes through. But we still have a lot of strong westerly winds aloft. As you can see in the latest SIMS shear analysis, here's your streaming westerly streamlines, and your upper level low in the western Atlantic is located right around this region, and as a result we have strong westerlies just to its south. And the same can also be said in the central Atlantic, where we have this large long wave trough. It's actually the tropical upper tropospheric trough that oftentimes begins to set up around the central Atlantic this time of the year, and we have an associated upper level low with it right around this region. And once again, down toward the south, we have 40 to 50 knots of upper level wind shear. This can also be seen a little bit better. There's your position of the tropical wave, and it's embedded directly in the middle of all of these strong westerlies. And it looks like as it continues off toward the central and western Caribbean, it will also have to continue to contend with westerly wind. Also, due to the current orientation of the aforementioned Azores high, it looks as though the low-level steering winds to the south of that high will begin to push the tropical wave into some of the coastal regions of South America. Over the next 48 hours, it looks as though some of the island nations, such as Barbados, Grenada, and Trinidad and Tobago, can expect an increase of shower and thunderstorm activity along with some gusty winds as this tropical wave continues to push westward. But not only will wind shear affect the chances of tropical development, but as noted, it's also going to parallel the South American coast for quite a while, so we're not expecting much of any type of organization over the next 3 or 4 days. None of the current dynamical model guidance shows any activity either, but this is a quick look at the 12Z GFS. As I set this into motion, the model does not do anything with the tropical wave. If anything, it just keeps a broad area of low pressure across the southwest Caribbean, while much of the remaining basin is fairly stable. So it looks like it's going to be another quiet week in the Atlantic. If anything, we'll keep an eye on the western Caribbean as that tropical wave arrives in the area. But at this current time, there's no indication that that storm is going to begin to try and develop. Now, if we take a quick look at the Eastern Pacific today, it's fairly quiet except for some convection along the intertropical convergence zone, but none of this is really separating or detaching. So therefore, we're not really expecting much in the way of tropical development from any of these features. But it looks like the lull in activity between Adrian and our next storm is not going to last very long based on the latest model guidance. Take the latest 12Z ECMWF run, for example. We're looking at 850 millibar vorticity. Here's the Eastern Pacific. This is the coastline of Mexico right here, along with El Salvador and Guatemala. All is quiet at the moment, but keep in mind this is where our broad area of low pressure is located due to the monsoonal trough. And as we go into 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, still not a whole lot going on, but the model is beginning to pick up on some low-level energy, beginning to focus itself near Panama, Costa Rica, and Honduras. This in fact could even be the tropical wave, or at least the lower half of the tropical wave that we're monitoring that's now beginning to move closer to the Lesser Antilles and coastal South America. Oftentimes, if they don't do anything in the Caribbean, they can end up going into the Eastern Pacific and producing tropical systems in that area. Anyways, by day 4, we now have an organized tropical area of low pressure, possibly developing into a tropical depression. And by day 5, day 6, and day 7, we now have a tropical cyclone threatening the Mexican Riviera based on the latest ECMWF run. This is the day 6 surface representation of what's happening, and as you can see, that's a fairly organized low pressure system, more than likely a tropical storm at least 1,002 millibars sitting just south of Mexico to the southwest of the Gulf of Tehuantepec by day 6. And this is day 7 for good measure. It's continuing to intensify, now down to 999 millibars. And the European solution is not alone. If we go back to the GFS run very quickly, there's not a whole lot going on in the first few days of the run, but toward the end we start to see an organizing mass of convection, and by day 7 we have a legit tropical storm just to the south of Mexico, not that far away from Acapulco, Mexico. The latest Canadian run is very similar. By day 4 it's beginning to organize, and we have a developing tropical storm actually trying to move north towards coastal areas by the end of the run. The current upper level winds in this region are fairly favorable. It just needs a system to actually take advantage of these upper level conditions, and the models are trying to keep the favorable upper level ridge aloft throughout the period. As you can see, upper level winds are really not that intense right now. This is the model initialized shear, and as I advance this, it really keeps away all of the main troughs as far north as the Gulf of Mexico. They really don't try to dip south very much at all throughout the next 7 days, and that's thanks to this presence of mid-level ridging located directly over Mexico City, and that's keeping all of these westerly winds well to the north into the United States. So that is your tropical update for this Monday. We'll keep a close watch on that tropical wave about to begin moving through the Caribbean. It probably won't do anything in the West Caribbean, although it may become a factor for the Eastern Pacific. But regardless of what tries to happen, we'll definitely keep a close watch on things. So check again tomorrow for another tropical video by tomorrow afternoon.